Empires, inventions, corporations, all fell the same way. Not by accident, by design. Sears did not collapse. It executed a designer specification. In 2008, Edward Lampert dismantled Sears Holdings from a single retail operation into more than 30 autonomous business units. Kenmore, Craftsman, Apparel, Real Estate, Home Services, Auto Centers. Each unit was given its own profit and loss statement. Each unit was required to negotiate contracts with the others for shared resources, warehousing, brand placement, data, IT infrastructure, as if they were separate companies operating under one roof. Executive compensation was tied to unit performance, not company survival. This was not a metaphor for internal competition. It was internal competition built with binding financial mechanics, and it did precisely what it was engineered to do. The bankruptcy filed a decade later, in 2018, was not a surprise ending. It was a maturity date. Lampert did not come from retail. He came from Wall Street, from a hedge fund with a controlling position in Sears debt and equity, and he brought with him a specific economic conviction that markets discover efficiency through competition, and that if competition works between companies, it should work equally well between divisions of the same company. On paper, the logic was not absurd. Decentralization has a long, credible history in corporate management. Break a bloated bureaucracy into accountable units, measure each one honestly, let capital flow toward what performs. This is standard doctrine, taught in business schools, praised by analysts. The board did not see a demolition plan. They saw discipline. They saw 30 business units finally forced to justify their own existence in hard numbers, no longer able to hide underperformance inside a consolidated statement. It looked, on the whiteboard, like accountability. That is the part of the record that matters most. The mechanism that killed Sears was not recognized as a threat by the people who approved it. It was recognized as reform. Here is where the architecture turns lethal, and the flaw is not cultural, not a vague failure of leadership vision. It is a specific incentive rule written into the transfer pricing system itself. When Kenmore needed data from Apparel, or when Home Services needed warehousing capacity controlled by another unit, the units did not collaborate. They negotiated as counterparties, each trying to extract the most favorable internal price for their own P&L, because that P&L determined their executives' bonuses. $1 spent helping a sister division was $1 subtracted from your own division's performance metric. There was no mechanism, none, that rewarded a unit for strengthening Sears as a whole at the expense of its own ledger. This produced an entirely predictable behavior: hoarding. Units refused to fund shared infrastructure unless the benefit flowed disproportionately back to them. E-commerce is the clearest fossil of this mechanism. In the 2000s, building a unified digital retail platform required cross-unit investment. Shared logistics, shared customer data, shared technology backbone. No single unit wanted to fund it, because the return would be captured by rival divisions' P&L statements, not their own. Amazon was not out innovating Sears during this period. Sears was structurally incapable of authorizing the investment because its own internal contract law made cross-unit capital allocation a negotiated hostility rather than a shared strategy. The real estate division tells the same story from the opposite direction. Real estate assets were not treated as infrastructure supporting retail operations. They were treated as an independently monetizable unit, extractable on their own terms, culminating later in the spin-off known as Seritat. The store was not a location where Sears sold refrigerators. The store was a landlord-tenant relationship between two internal entities, and one of those entities had every financial incentive to extract rent from the other. This is not metaphorical cannibalization. It is line item cannibalization occurring inside a single consolidated tax return. The 10 years between 2008 and 2018 were not a period of decline. They were a period of concealment. 3 mechanisms manufactured the appearance of continued viability while the underlying structure consumed itself. First, stock buybacks. Capital that could have funded cross-unit infrastructure was instead returned to shareholders, propping the equity narrative without touching the incentive architecture that was starving operations. Second, Lampert's own lending to the company, positioning him simultaneously as chief executive, primary shareholder, and creditor. A structure in which the man diagnosing the patient also held the mortgage on the hospital. Third, and most consequential, the real estate monetization strategy, which converted physical assets into short-term liquidity while permanently removing the collateral base the retail operations depended on. Each of these mechanisms produced cash. None of them addressed the transfer pricing incentive that caused units to underfund shared survival. The rot was never treated. It was refinanced. The exposure event was not a single day. It was the acceleration of store closures beginning around 2017 and intensifying through 2018 at precisely the moment sale-leaseback transactions peaked. Retail units, capital starved by a decade of internal hoarding, could not sustain store operations. Real estate units, financially incentivized to extract value independent of retail health, continued monetizing properties even as the tenants inside them failed. This is the moment outsiders finally saw what the internal ledgers had shown since 2008. The units had never been in a partnership. They had been in a contest, and the contest had a finite pool of resources, and someone was always going to lose that contest permanently. Bankruptcy did not create the internal cannibalization. It simply removed the accounting layer that had been concealing it from public view. This pattern is not unique to Sears, and the channel exists to document its recurrence. Any organization that installs unit-level compensation without a countervailing mechanism for systemic health reproduces this exact failure mode. Stack ranking systems, most visibly documented at General Electric under the Welch-era performance culture, created internal competition for ranking slots rather than collaborative output, and organizations that adopted the same model inherited the same fracture points. Holding companies with siloed profit and loss reporting, where subsidiary executives are measured purely on subsidiary performance, consistently exhibit the identical symptom: resource hoarding, refusal of cross-subsidiary investment, and eventual extraction of shared assets by whichever unit holds the most leverage. The specific industry does not matter. The specific product does not matter. What matters is the incentive rule. Reward the part, not the whole. And wherever that rule is installed, this outcome is not a risk. It is a specification. Before the record closes, one clarification belongs on file, separate from the case itself. If you are examining organizational failure at this level of granularity, studying how compensation architecture and incentive design produce predictable collapse, the analytical frameworks used in institutional forensic auditing are available through the resource linked in the description. It is the same category of documentation this channel draws from when reconstructing incentive failures like Sears. The units did exactly what they were built to do. They optimized for themselves. The company was never one of the units they were optimizing for. That omission was not an oversight discovered later. It was the design, dated 2008, executed on schedule,